Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson M.D. The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. Robert Burns. Life doesn't always turn out the way we think it will. When change happens, a lot of us have a natural tendency to resist that change. Why? Simply put, we are afraid of change. Change represents the unknown, which challenges our sense of safety and security. This is a very simple story about change. It's about seeing change, anticipating change, and adapting to change. Now, that sounds incredibly boring, but luckily the author, Spencer Johnson, has put a cool little twist on a boring topic and has interwoven the lessons of change into the story of four characters: two mice named Sniff and Scurry, and two little people, who are the same size as mice, named Hem and Haw. These four characters represent parts of us. They represent the simple and complex within each of us. As Spencer put it, sometimes we may act like Sniff, who sniffs out change early, or Scurry, who scurries into action, or Hem, who denies and resists change as he fears it will lead to something worse, or Haw, who learns to adapt in time when he sees changing can lead to something better. The four characters leave their homes in the morning and search around the maze day in and day out, searching for cheese. The cheese is a metaphor for what we want to have in life, whether that be a relationship, a career, freedom, health, a big house, and so on. The cheese represents what it is in our lives that makes us happy. It's the thing that we're always chasing. The maze represents where we spend most of our time looking for that so-called cheese, whether it be in the relationships of your life, in an organization, or in the community you live in. Let's get into the story. Sniff, Scurry, Hem, and Haw got up early each morning, put on their running shoes, and ran around the maze looking for their favorite cheese. The mice used a trial and error method to find their cheese. One would sniff and the other would scurry around. The little people used their more sophisticated brains to find the cheese. Eventually, they both found an enormous amount of cheese at Cheese Station C. All was good. They all went back to Cheese Station C every morning, got fat on cheese, and returned home every night. This went on for a while. As time went on, Sniff and Scurry continued to wake up bright and early every morning. They scurried over to the cheese station, sniffed around to see if anything had changed, and then enjoyed their cheese throughout the day. Hem and Haw, on the other hand, started waking up later each morning and would walk over to the cheese station, expecting their cheese to be there. They had so much cheese at Cheese Station C that they felt confident it would continue to be there each morning. They had become a bit arrogant in their success of finding the cheese, and a bit too comfortable. As you can imagine, one day the cheese was all gone. When the mice arrived early that morning, they were not surprised. They had noticed that their cheese supply was getting less and less as they did their morning inspections. They simply put their running shoes back on and set out into the maze looking for new cheese. They didn't complicate the issue. The problem and the solution were simple. No more cheese? Go find new cheese. As the author stated, the situation at Cheese Station C had changed, so Sniff and Scurry decided to change. When Hem and Haw arrived later that day, they were shocked. Their whole world had been turned upside down. They weren't aware of the changes occurring in their environment and assumed the cheese would always be there. Hem ranted and raved. "What? No cheese? No cheese? Who moved my cheese?" He hollered for a while and finally said, "It's not fair." Haw was just as stunned, but he didn't rant and rave. He just stood there in shock and disbelief. He couldn't believe it and just tuned it all out. They went home that night hoping it would be back the next day, but as you can imagine, it wasn't there. The cheese was gone and it wasn't coming back. Hem began blaming others, stating, "We are entitled to our cheese. Why did they do this to me? What's really going on here?" Sniff and Scurry had been on the move and had already found new cheese at Cheese Station N. Hem and Haw faced a lot of the same emotions that many of us face when change slaps us in the face. They didn't want to face the facts. They were in denial. They didn't want to go back into the maze and look for new cheese because that meant uncertainty, getting lost, and possibly making a fool of themselves. The fear of failure had taken grip. They returned back to the empty Cheese Station C every day simply because it was familiar to them. It was their comfort zone. Haw began to come to his senses. He realized the error of his ways and began laughing when he realized what fear was doing to him. Haw tried to convince Hem to leave the station with him in search of new cheese, but Hem didn't want to listen. Haw contemplated his fears and asked himself, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Haw built up some courage, started to believe that he could find new cheese, envisioned himself finding new cheese, and then set off into the dark maze alone and uncertain of what's to come. Although the journey into the unknown was tough at first, that sense of adventure began to energize him. He wished he had set out in search for new cheese earlier and said to himself, "Better late than never." By this point in the story, Haw had already learned some valuable lessons. Expect change. Look for signs that change is coming. Or in the words of Spencer Johnson, smell the cheese often so you know when it's getting old. And finally, adapt to change quickly. While on his new cheese quest, he continued to reflect on why he didn't leave sooner. He realized that his fears were holding him back. As Spencer stated so perfectly in the book, what you are afraid of is never as bad as what you imagine. The fear you build up in your mind is worse than the situation that actually exists. Fear had been clouding his mind. He lived in a state of fear and focused on what could go wrong instead of what could go right. He finally understood that you have two choices. You can believe that change will harm you, in which case you'll resist it, or you can believe that change will help you, in which case you'll embrace the change. As he searched the maze, he realized he was happy when he wasn't being run by his fears. Sure, some fear is natural and should be taken seriously, since it can keep you out of real danger. But he knew that most of his fears were irrational, and stopping him from making the changes he needed to. Letting go and trusting in what lay ahead even though he didn't know what it was, and not letting fear stop him from his quest, was what nourished his soul and gave him strength. He realized that change could lead to something better. As he continued to look for new cheese, he continued learning some key lessons. The quicker you let go of old cheese, the sooner you find new cheese. Movement in a new direction helps you find new cheese. Imagine yourself enjoying your new cheese leads you to it. It is safer to search in the maze than remain in a cheeseless situation. When you see that you can find and enjoy new cheese, you change course. Old beliefs do not lead to new cheese. Noticing small changes early helps you adapt to the bigger changes that are to come. Haw attempted to go back and show Hem the new lessons he had learned, but Hem was still stuck in his old ways. Hem wanted his old cheese back and wasn't willing to change. Haw finally gave up and realized that Hem would have to find his own way in order to move beyond his comfort zone and face his fears. No one else could do it for him. Haw had come to the realization that the biggest inhibitor to change lies within yourself, and that nothing gets better until you change. See, the mice kept things simple. They didn't overcomplicate. They didn't overanalyze. They changed as the situation changed. The little people made these simple things quite complicated with their complex brains, belief systems, and human emotions. The little people are obviously smarter than the mice, but they're directing their energies in the wrong direction. Imagine if they had the right attitudes and beliefs. Imagine if they used their amazing brains to envision something better, to reflect on the mistakes of the past and use them when making plans for the future, to keep things simple and flexible, and to realize that you don't need to overcomplicate things or confuse yourself with fear-based beliefs. Wow, they would be unstoppable. At one point in the story, the author stated that Haw laughed and realized that he had started to change as soon as he had learned to laugh at himself and at what he had been doing wrong. He realized the fastest way to change is to laugh at your own folly. Then you can let go and quickly move on. Haw continued on his journey day in and day out. He finally understood that breaking out of your comfort zone and enjoying the journey for new cheese is rewarding in and of itself. Actually, finding the new cheese is just an additional bonus. Finally, Haw stumbled upon Cheese Station N, where Sniff and Scurry were hanging out enjoying their cheese. They were still ready for change, as was Haw. They kept a good eye on things, and Haw continued to venture out into the maze every now and then to see if anything had changed. He was aware and ready to adapt at a moment's notice. One day, Haw heard a noise outside of Cheese Station N. It sounded like someone else was coming. Could it be Hem, he thought? He said a little prayer and looked around the corner to see. The end. Did Hem show up, or was it someone else? That's for you to decide. Can the Hems of the world, or in ourselves, change their ways in their own time? I think so. It's a great little story with lots of great lessons. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, all change isn't good. We shouldn't just mindlessly conform to the needless changes forced on us by others. Great point. And in the foreword, Dr. Ken Blanchard addresses this. He says, "Everyone knows that not all change is good or even necessary, but in a world that is continually changing, It is to our advantage to learn how to adapt and enjoy something better. It is not what is in the story of who moved my cheese, but how you interpret it and apply it to your own situation that gives it value. Which character will you choose to be? Do you like to sniff things out and seek out opportunities? Do you like to jump into action like Scurry? Or are you more like Ha, who resists change initially, but remains open-minded enough to adapt before it's too late? On a personal note, the Haws can be valuable because they do keep things a bit grounded. A world of only sniffs and scurries may change too rapidly and simply fall apart. The Haws do provide a bit of stability. Or do you want to be like Hem? Poor Hem, the anchor who isn't willing to change the way things are done. He's in his comfort zone and often says things like, "That's the way it's always been done around here." The Hems of the world are either too comfortable where they are, or they're too scared to change. They don't realize that the way things are done may have to change in order to survive and thrive. The Hems often feel like victims when their cheese, which they're somehow entitled to, is taken away from them. They whine and complain and resist moving on. Think about the different people in your life, in your relationships, work life, communities, and so on. Who are the Hems, Haws, Scurries, and Sniffs? How can this story help you deal with them better? How can these lessons help them? Change is difficult for people. It makes people afraid, so keep that in mind when guiding and helping people through the path of change. Ultimately, they have to do it themselves, but you can certainly show them the way. This is a very short book with lots of great lessons, so please, if you don't have a copy, go grab one. Read it and give it to a friend or a family member. It just may change their outlook on life. As Benjamin Franklin stated, change is the only constant in life. One's ability to adapt to those changes will determine your success in life. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like and subscribe, and drop me a comment below. Thanks, and I'll see you guys next time.